Alright, 1 second.
Let me live, Lawrence. I'm trying my best. What? I didn't ask to be high craft. I actually strongly did not want to.
That's when you should.
I just need to delete my paradigm entirely. Why isn't the water file I'm supposed to submit my ballot?
You don't need this right now. You just start fucking submitting the later. I already clicked start round, so we're registered to start. Alright, I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay. You good? Yep. Identity comes first. All of obligations only exist as long as subject identities from the power and relation society. Fundamentally, Judge Butler 19 subject is constructed through differentiation, autonomy is a consequence of dependency, social relations, condition the subject because the subject is constructed through exclusion, constituted character the condition of its possibility of resignifying processes only found through powers of fluid and constitutional. All our interaction, whether they be with institutions or other subjects, only fluid conception of power can enable any resistance. You cannot solve power or may. Society is swimming pool powers water when one actually creates movements of water which impact other swimmers. Some manipulate water rising to powers of dominance, the rising positions of dominance. Some drown movements of water have unescapable effects on swimmers. Power can neither be abstracted from nor ideologized within. The only way which is possible to free is to perceive power as free and practice liberty upon it. This level allows resistance. Powers of relational creation. Power implies resistance rather than speaking of an essential antagonism between power and resistance. They would be speaking of an antagonism, a relationship that a mutual enticement and struggle. Ubiquity of power is the subject practice of resistance, and the implication of fact of the subject is the effect of power impacts. Advocacies that do not account for the fluid nature of power never fail because it reduces a complicated interlocking system of actors to battle between the haves and have-nots instead of accounting for the complicated and hidden exercise of power that define impressions at their root viewpoint. A procedural set attempts to establish rules for appropriate conduct fail because they operate in a view of power that isn't one rule can account for every instance that reflectively respond to each situation unique. Any understanding of self exists in relation to these power structures which necessitates care for self. Foucault 84 care for self implies complex relations with others that aims at non-domination. Self takes non-ontological presence. Care for the self is a way of controlling and limiting the abuse of power. Good rule is one who exercises their power correctly by exercising the power for themselves. The power of themselves regulates the power over other. Risk of dominating comes from one and not care for oneself and become a slave to their desires. Care for the self is a strong identity under any form of only way to understand our moral obligation to other people. Otherwise, ethics will not bind agents and general obligations. Our relationship with power is foundation for any liberation. Church against expression mind methodology necessitates being vision with liberated subject looks like before pursuing change. Go 2. If one does not treat liberation and safeguards, refers back to a foundation which was conceded by some repressive mechanism of self-emphasis to unloosen laws to oneself, finds one's nature, and restore relationship between oneself. When people try to free themselves, not sufficient to establish practice of liberty, and later on be necessary for these people to decide upon acceptable forms of existence. Impact 8 point is the method that we say that we need self-oppression, but do not account for what a liberated world looks like. Fail B point liberation comes from teaching individuals, not institutions. Changing institutions, self-definition fails. It does not account for the individuals that guide and manipulate the institution. We should focus on the kind of people we want to be, rather than the institution and society we want to have. The role of specific intellectuals engage in genealogy, which conditions the meanings that affect practices. Dreyfus and Remno explain that the genealogists find questions that are deepest and the questions are most superficial. B one interprets more. One not only finds a fixed meaning, but other interpretations created and imposed by other people. Genealogy records a history of these interpretations. Thus, the standard rule compels to engage in care for self through a genealogical analysis. Care for self-analysis to reflexively adopt positive standpoints to our power identified through genealogies. And genealogy is the only way to interrogate and break down whiteness, controls material and race impacts. Yancy. A genealogical examination showing how whiteness emerges structures what deems value. Genealogy creates a possibility of altering them. Whiteness is particularly contingent upon the capacity to conceal its historicity. Genealogy is value creating and attempts to critically overcome impact of one genealogy are not oriented towards solving problems in the real world, but rather towards understanding the nature of things in problems in society. This is critical because otherwise we simply operate within existing power structures instead of analyzing and creating a risk of uncovering truth. Koopman. Genealogy is so practice of problematic that making normative claims quickly conceptualize the dangers where previously we did not have a concept that enables us to handle these problems. Articulations of the present provide us with the tools we need to normally reconstruct our present. Genealogy is critically effective without normative intent. Therefore, Nick often must lead to a counter genealogy that engages with the mind, making blanket observation about the world without gaining a perspective of genealogy. Dooms any normative project to failure. Turning their method. Second, simply reading historical examples of our problem is not enough to do genealogy. We must examine change over time to uncover how power structures have transformed and constituted themselves in various points in history. Absent this historical analysis pointless because it fails to reveal how to engage in reconstruction of the present. Any counter genealogy needs to advocate for maintenance or expansion of QNI. Any other change to the CGS 8 point is reading a genealogy about the CGS generally about any part of the system does not prove that there's a construction of power better than removing QI within the CGS. So doesn't negate B point proving CGS is better or ought not exist affirms because the affirms a limitation on QI, which is not inconsistent with the removal of CGS because the analyzed limit the state's power and the advocacy was just limited more, which means that the only competitive engagement with the act is a defensive practice of qualified immunity. Now, part 2 of the genealogy. Since established in 1982, qualified immunity has been arbitrarily gained for some case of the non. Others that are similar. Scott 12, 30 years after the ruling, there's no short-lived guidance on how to apply the test in Saucer. Protester was arrested by police officer. Excessive force was used. The request for qualified immunity was denied. Supreme Court's guidance in Saucer provided mandatory to inquiry approach should be used in the future qualified immunity case. The court deviated from its own pronunciation 3 years earlier. In 2009, Supreme Court decided Pearson versus Callahan of officers request for qualified immunity. Unanimous courts offering the mandatory nature of Saucer approach, which is this empirically confirmed after the court was no longer required to make decisions about whether or not constitutional rights were violated in any defense, which meant the court was able to escape setting precedent for future officer rules. 11 courts avoided constitutional determination in 6.2% of claims in Saucer period after Pearson avoided the determination 24.6% of claims. Now, 2012, present qualified immunity has been skewed towards favoring defendants, pointing towards the necessity of revision via law. Qualified immunity is plot favors defendants over plaintiff. Re-evaluation is necessary. Now, advocacy. The affirms to the preview genealogical analysis, which reveals the most equitable orientation towards powers, one where there's a limitation of qualified immunity. We not advocate any post-fiat policy advocacy method implementation. Post-fiat impact scenarios don't matter under the framework, but will defend links to dissents based on U.S. implementing qualified immunity limit if you win a post-fiat framework that makes them relevant. And now, the acts of better method of care for the self is shown in Scott and Rolls, Pearson, and Callahan. Pearson versus Callahan meant that qualified immunity is no longer required testing whether constitutional rights have been violated in every case, which creates legal greyhound where individuals' rights are viewed as indeterminate and circumstantial, preventing any restraining police constraint unless or arbitrary use of state power. Found in legal greyhound the possibility that police powers are limited with legal constraints. Their space superior discretion is corresponds to virtuous and anti-cycling institutions of legal order. And comply legality, other legalities, compulsional legality may result in subversion of legal greyhound. Evidence of the state's need to justify its action through law. Cut the card. And law legal greyhounds precludes care for subject individuals never know whether or not they have rights or not. Guarantees that they will actually be enforced. Also remove the ability for the individual to appeal to the government and make themselves visible because the status of the individual rights to never adjudicate and perpetuate themselves by different constitutional determinations. Also, I just defended the method of genealogy, not necessarily Foucault's method of specifically conducting genealogy.
Yep. Is everyone ready? What is self-care?
So care for self is saying that we have to open up modes of self-reflection.
Alright, what does that mean?
So you want me to give you an example of the app?
Sure.
So for example, the argument under the care for self portion of the app is saying that legal greyhounds preclude care for self because individuals never know whether or not they have rights or guarantees that will actually be enforced.
Wait, what does this have to do with self-reflection?
Because if they do not, and they also remove the ability for the individual to appeal to the government and make themselves visible.
Wait, why can't they appeal? Why can't they appeal?
Because legal greyhounds means that their rights are circumstantial.
So what does this have to do with self-reflection?
The argument is that if individuals' rights are circumstantial, they're not able to open up modes for self-reflection because they do not know if their rights will be protected.
What rights do I need to self-reflect?
So, like I said, for example, the Feldman evidence is talking about any type of right? Legal greyhounds prohibit care for the self because.
So wait, so I need like an infinite amount of rights in order to self-reflect.
That is not the argument. You just have to show. So, like for example, the way you impact back care for the self is you'd show how X or Y thing would impact an individual's ability to open up to modes of self-reflection.
Okay, but you make the claim that we need rights. Like what rights? Like could you name me a right that I need to self-reflect?
For example, let's say like a constitutional right.
No, like I want a specific right. What right do I need in order to self-reflect?
Like a constitutional right.
Okay, so then explain to me how a right to property helps me self-reflect.
A right to property.
Right, that's a constitutional right.
Sure.
What does that do to
So
self-reflection?
I guess the Feldman argument is more specific. Or actually, yeah. So the right to property. So
the case has nothing to do with self-reflection in the context of rights, then.
It does have to do something with that.
Okay, but you can't tell me why. You said that we need any right. So I give the example of property rights. If property rights do not matter, then why do we care about the self-reflection?
I'd say property rights wouldn't matter because if you do not know whether or not your property is guaranteed to you, then obviously it would hinder your self-reflection.
Okay. All right. Just to clarify the advocacy, you do not defend like a post-fiat implementation at all. Okay. So then, why does granting dissent links help me?
It's just I say that you can have any dissent link you want. You just have to win a framework that makes them relevant.
Okay. So that's like saying that you'll let me be the NC. Does the app have the right to then exclude those dissents?
What do you mean?
Like, for example, can you get up and say, like, under your framework they're relevant?
If you don't read a framework that makes them relevant, obviously it doesn't matter under the app.
Okay, so the dissents functionally don't matter if I conceded to the AC framework.
If you don't win a framework that makes them relevant, they are not relevant.
Alright, what is a genealogy?
A genealogy analyzes how power structures have constituted themselves throughout history.
Okay, so what is this in the context of self-reflection?
So the argument is that genealogy allows us to understand how power structures have conditioned themselves in society and how they've influenced like how we are, like how our society is structured now, which means that we're able to self.
Okay. I'll just I have 212 left. 2 over. Let me just flash it.
What's the order?
It's gonna be 3 off case.
Yeah.
3 off. Around 6 M's. Oh, do you mind if I borrow this?
Around 6 M's.
Alright. Everyone ready? Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
Alright. We're all ready now. Okay. I negate and value legal justice, meaning court decisions that give parties their due. Legal judgments exist to hold wrongdoers accountable, so appropriate determination of culpability is key. Robinson et al. If laws was simply a collection of rules which do not reflect blameworthiness, there would be little reason to defer to it as a moral authority. Law must earn reputation for punishing those who deserve it. Every deviation from desert can incrementally undercut the law's moral credibility, which can undercut its ability to help in the creation of norms, and its power to gain compliance and reciprocity must be at the heart of any legal system, or else people have no reason to consent to laws. Rachel's. If reciprocity could not be expected, treating others well would occupy a less important place in a system that respects deserts. Someone who treats others may expect to be treated well in return, while someone who treats others badly cannot. If this were eliminated, morality would have no rewards, would be less reason to be concerned with it, for imperfectly benevolent beings. Desert provides the reason for being moral. Thus, the sufficient affirmative burden is to prove that limiting qualified immunity treats police with the level of culpability they deserve. A deserved level of culpability shows a causal link between act and harm. Thus, the affirmative must demonstrate that police officers are at fault for the harms they've caused. My thesis and sole contention is that individuals did not create institutional harms by targeting specific officers instead of police culture as a whole, affirming unjustly scapegoats individuals and misses the larger problem. Limiting QI means suing individual police officers for a problem that results from a collective culture, Armacost. It is essential that the police organization fix and formulate solutions to police misconduct versus factually inaccurate to focus on individual deeds and ignore the organization, law enforcement, organizations that have cultures, commonly held norms that encourage certain behaviors. Police agencies are culpable if they tolerate cultures that promote conduct that is objectionable. Second, is unfair to lay responsibility for misconduct solely on the feet of individual officers. Officers are embedded in an organization that makes them more likely to frame their judgment in terms of role-based obligations. Legal sanctions that assume an individual rational action model are less successful than determining police misbehavior. Finally, the impulse to isolate misbehaving officers as rogue cops is a search for scapegoats while punishing individuals may satisfy society's thirst for someone to blame. It causes misimportant systemic causes that like that individual acts of brutality focusing on only isolated actors may divert attention away from needed institutional reform. By ignoring structures that cause misconduct, the AF unjustly assigns full culpability to individuals failing the burden. Second off, the AF must defend implementation of a policy limiting qualified immunity. Resolve the notes of policy. The notes of proposal to be enacted by law. Words in phrase 64. Definitions to express an opinion by resolution was resolved by the legislator as meaning to establish by law. Because the violation in cross proves he does not defend a post-fiat advocacy. So here are the net benefits. First, ground not defending implementation means that no distance apply, lose election court clock overturns and more. This is proven in cross exists after win the NC framework, which functionally means that under the AF framing, I have no access said. And second, real world discussion of policy is key to actual change. Coverstone. The power to imagine public advocacy is one virtue of fiat simulation is far more empowering. Imagine myself starting a revolution is no less than imagine myself on Capitol Hill. One fantasy speaks the language of political power, the other disables action by making one a laughing stock. And advocacy skills are key to any change. Voters' advocacy skills key to any real world change. There are tons of stupid things in the world that we have an obligation to fix. Also, no RBIs. He doesn't get an RBI to prove that he was fair at the round in the first place. Third off, counterplan. The United States ought to maintain qualified immunity for police officers, but establish a system of vicarious liability that lets citizens sue police departments instead of individual officers. Good one. The 1964 Police Act enacted vicarious liability for police torts, making the chief officer of the force liable in respect of torts committed by constables. Under their direction, there should be paid out of the police fund any damage awarded against police in any proceedings brought against them. B is the competition. The counterplan competes to net benefits. C is the solvency. The counterplan creates real change. The title of police become involved when they're on the line. Good two. The control of conduct of a hierarchy is better to internalize a controlling norm at the top and let it seep down to inject the norm at the bottom and hope that it will rise, but the policymaker is vicariously liable. The department may become more easily involved in discussion of law enforcement. The presence of high echelon police officers translates to a normal tort into a judicial consideration of police practice involved. Instead of prosecuting the underling, it's better to deter the policymakers responsible for tolerating misbehavior and sufficiently supervising conduct. The NC functions as a net benefit by identifying the real problem the counterplan is actually able to solve. Now on case. First. As an overview, we have no idea what the actual genealogy is or how it properly functions in the context of what the AC is speaking out. Also, off the fluidity arguments. First, it takes out his own framework of power as fluid. We cannot look at identity in the abstract because we have no idea what it is. Therefore, anxious identity, we don't know what it is. Second, he can't conflate pre and post fiat arguments. If I argue for a specific rule, it means that there is a way for stable power to exist in the first place, which means he cannot leverage the Foucault analysis against T off the care for self arguments. First, my burden is a prerequisite. I control the internal link. I determine if they're appropriately being held culpable. We can't care for ourselves if we are being told we are liable for something else. Also, if self-care requires some sort of self-reflection in the context of constitutional rights, there's in cross-exposed deficit on this. We have no idea what self-care actually is, which means my framework is needed to ground it to some sort of actual being. He could not give me a single example of what constitutional right we need for self-reflection in the first place. He just said that they would be scared anyways, and also links to his own. He also links into his own criticism. Individuals cannot limit QI, so he relies on an institution in the first place, which means he functionally bites into the genealogical harms. Now, off the genealogy good stuff. First. Look to historical limits of qualified immunity. These have had negative impacts overall. Higdon 1. Less than 10% of citizens can afford civil litigation against public agencies, and they go out of their way to take advantage of the citizen. When law enforcement blocks investigations, 90% of the cover-up is complete. The civil litigation is about a settlement with no admission of wrongdoing and a secrecy agreement that hides corruption. Public agents' civil litigation involves suppressing all documentation that can be used against agency, which means the act of using civil lawsuits is inherently bad because police will lead to more covering up, and also police exploit financial vulnerabilities to make so only some people can sue. Higdon 2. The financial disadvantages to citizens in civil litigation is an effective tool for public agencies to cover up corruption. Exposure of any potential law enforcement corruption automatically activates the blue wall of protection. Law enforcement has the culpability and incentive to obstruct investigations of criminal complaints. Law enforcement agencies know when they shut the door on criminal complaints, 90% of the complaints will disappear because of the high cost of civil litigation. The small percentage of remaining complaints will then be litigated in civil court with no criminal investigation, no admission of wrongdoing. All dollar damage will be paid for with tax dollars. The settlement agreements generally include a secrecy clause to further corruption, which means he's only incentivizing these governments to act more corrupt in the first place. That is exactly what civil lawsuits do, which is an independent reason why the genealogy is bad and proves that historically these institutions have been oppressive. And now off the offense with first, the Act blocks out institutional reform. Departments just pay for officers and people are satisfied, never challenging departments that causes harm in the first place. Emory. When the city errs on indemnifying every officer, no one complains. Police officers are satisfied and avoid personal liability. The victims are satisfied. No interest in disturbing the status quo. Not everyone wins. Taxpayers lose. They pay millions of fund settlements. The community loses because this system perpetuates police misconduct. The law in the city. Discretion to defend from police wrongdoing, which inherently mandates that the AC implements some sort of advocacy, but there isn't any, which means he just allows for these harms to perpetuate in the first place. And lawsuits are hidden from the public and brush these issues under the rug. They fail to galvanize the public about misconduct. Emery 2. The great majority of civil rights conclude with a settlement for civil litigation and frequently achieves vindication. Most suits settle over and never see the inside of a courtroom. Civil litigation is mostly ineffective. This punishment is of no solace to the victims of police misconduct, especially those who must heavily face an officer who lies with impunity. Police officers are so far removed from the process they often have no idea how much their case settled for, which means there's functionally no reason why he's creating any sort of accountability in the first place. Even if qualified immunities are arbitrary, civil suits make it worse because it'll only incentivize police to cover up and hide the history behind it, which means we could never engage in any sort of genealogy in the first place if we do not know what has been happening anyways.
Include everything even.
Yep.
What was the last argument you made at the end of your speech? You said it prevents us from engaging in genealogy in the first place.
So what I'm saying is that we cannot undergo any sort of historical analysis if the fact that what is happening in lawsuits is being covered up by the police.
Let's go to show. Advocacy skills is the only voter?
Yep.
Okay. What's the impact of ground to advocacy skills?
If I cannot engage, then I could not advocate harms that would happen under your act.
Okay, what does advocacy skills mean?
It means that we have the ability to have portable out-of-ground skills. There are tons of screwed things in the world that we should have an obligation to fix. If we don't actually look to policy solutions, we cannot fix those problems.
What was your reason for no RBI?
The fact that just because you prove you're fair is not a reason you should win.
Okay. Let's go to the counterpoint. How does this link in the app at all?
It's competing, so it's like you say in the app that I need some sort of counter methodology or counter genealogy, and what I'm saying is that we maintain it but use vicarious liability. And this way we hold these police institutions accountable because they're the ones who are creating the harms the app criticizes.
What is vicarious liability?
That means we hold the whole police force accountable, like the police department, as opposed to an individual officer.
Okay. That's fine. Let's go to the arguments you made on the app. If power is fluid, why does that mean we can't look at identity?
The argument here is that if power is fluid, then we can never pinpoint what identity is, which means that in your...
I'll take the rest. Half top down. Half top down and C.
So easy top down. Counterpoint C, Nancy. Gotcha.
So we're good.
Powers of biggest include like water in a swimming pool. That's our armament evidence. The F is not trying to solve power. Rather, it tries to figure out how we should orient ourselves toward it, like a swimmer shooting how deep to dive, which requires careful self kind of reflective engagement, where we think about what a liberated world would look like and how we'd fit into it. That's Pico 1 and 2 evidence, which is only possible through genealogy, where we examine past actions in order to real ways we can restructure the past present. That's the Dreyfus and Raven evidence. So the role of us to engage in genealogy, care for self through genealogy. Now let's go to your arguments. First, you say power is fluid. We cannot look to identity. This is just false. Butler evidence indicates that identities are constructed through power relations. So this is always so the concession of Butler is pretty damning there. Now you say that I cannot conflate pre-fiat arguments when I cross-apply would be, and I cannot weigh the African's theory. I cannot cross-apply arguments from the African's theory. But yes, I can. If I win the warrants from the if I win warrants from the as to why the theory is a norm or consumption does not make sense. It's the reason why theory goes away. It's not necessarily conflicting post-periodic distinction. You usually need to treat it as an argument that applies onto that layer. Now, next you said that there's no idea of what self-care is because I'm not define what it means to self-reflect. But yes, I do. Specifically in the Feldman evidence, I indicate that individuals cannot engage in self-reflection because their rights are circumstantial. They do not know which rights are guaranteed or not, which prevents them from self-reflecting because they do not know whether or not they have rights guaranteed by the state or not. That's pretty clear in the AF. Now, that's pretty clear in the AF. Next, okay, go to contention. The AF is a brief analysis containing a limitation of qualified immunity in the United States, which is a better orientation of power and care for the self-qualified immunity has developed in such a way as harm minority communities and skewed towards defendants while disregarding whether constitutional rights have been violated. Now, that's the scope, Ralph, Spieler, and Bernick evidence. Now, the problem with your genealogy is you're conceding reasons from the AF which conditions what genealogy is irrelevant. You have to examine change over time, not just point out specific examples in history where something has been problematic, which means that the AF's genealogy is more comprehensive. The second argument is that you not impact your genealogy back to care for self, i.e., why your genealogy even matters under the framing. The world allows to engage in care for self through genealogy, not just merely presented genealogy, which means that you do not do this impacting in your first speech. Don't let him have access to that in his next speech. You should have done it now. Also, the AF is better for care for self because qualified immunity results in arbitrary use of state power that prevents individuals from knowing whether or not their rights are guaranteed and reifies them by disregarding constitutional violations. Now, the other argument you make is you say we cannot engage in historical analysis because of what happens in lawsuits, but these are post-fiat impacts. These are not relevant to my advocacy, which means that all the turns on case do not matter either. These turns are concerned with the post-fiat implementation of a policy, which the AF does not defend. The AF is literally a pre-fiat analysis containing that the power relationships behind limitation on qualified immunity would be better. Now go to NC. The NC says that every moral rule needs a specific context, but the AF says the only context we should have, the AF says the only context we should have is in terms of power relationships because we need to analyze power relationships which shape society. And investigation of power and how power shapes reality is a prerequisite to any NC offense, which means the world about and also the world about function on a higher layer. Now, next go to T. The framing is that the question of how you should evaluate T's and what norms are good or bad, but the practice of norm setting itself. Theory since we can set a norm for debate. My firm chances normal presupposition you make indicting the practice. You cannot leverage yourselves abuse against this. Instead, you have to win that the practice of theory is itself justified. Now, the AF takes that theory. You've conceded the basic point under RA. Norms are not set in stone. Rather, the power to find them is fluid and contingent. So theory inherently fails to set norms. So also dissent to your interpretation, which requires that I use a state to subvert power, since the state has no power to implement the AF or net, which takes out all your policy-making arguments. Now, also counter-interpretation. The AF does not have to defend the hypothetical implementation of a post-fiat policy. The AF defends ethicality legal to every general limitation of qualified immunity based on genealogical investigation. Now, that benefits one philosophical education. My interpretation first the debate on philosophical principles. Yours undermines it by focusing on implementation concern framing arguments as to why genealogy is good and net benefit to your interpretation. Education outweighs those conceded from the role of value. Conceded reasons why my AF is specifically good. Philosophical education unique debate because we do not get it from anywhere else. Now, let's go to your interpretation quickly. The only voter here is advocacy skills, which is problematic insofar as you concede all the reasons why AF is good for care for self. AF is better, which means it's better for care for, which means it's better for it means it's better for advocacy skills because it's letting us open ourselves to reflect the most of engagement and determine what kind of people we want to be in the real world. You've also conceded arguments from the AF about how we cannot try to solve problem or we cannot solve power, which means that advocacy skills as a voter does not make sense because we cannot solve problems in the real world. We can't solve power.
I have 212. The order is going to be T and C counterplan F.
One more time.
T and C counterplan F. And on T, I'll kind of start with an overview. Is everyone ready? As an overview to T, his own usage of the theory inherently violates the counter-interpretation as an attempt to set a norm in debate. However, the entire F indicts norms, which means all arguments on T completely fall apart for the F. So extend my interpretation, the F must defend implementation of a policy limiting qualified immunity. How it's key to decide ground standard goes cold conceded. I cannot link any distance into the F because he can always say that the framework totally excludes them and extend the real world policy discussion with covers on the power to imagine. Public advocacy is a great virtue of T, and that simulation is far more powerful. We should imagine ourselves starting revolutions, which is why why he needs to implement a policy in the first place, because it has a direct impact on advocacy skills. Advocacy skills also controls the direction of any impact towards education, because debate is only valuable because it has a portability, i.e. with advocacy skills in the first place. So there's no offense. Going back to his counter-interpretation is not one independent reason. He tries to go for the philosophy argument. However, first turn, I'm forcing him to actually defend a topical AC in which he could have set up with a philosophical framework in which we could have had a philosophical debate. I present the NC as an attempt to do so. However, there is no philosophical engagement coming out of the F in the first place. Also, the education not way argument is nowhere in the AC. The role of ballot is a question of genealogy, not a question of education. Those two are fundamentally different things. So this argument makes no sense in context of T. Now, on the NC. He's flat out conceding the NC framework, which means it functions as a side country on any sort of genealogy, extended province, legal judgments exist to hold wrongdoers accountable. So we need to appropriately determine any sort of culpability in the first place. We cannot assign blame. We cannot determine what genealogy is good or bad if we do not understand how things work, or if we cannot hold people accountable for them in the first place. And extend Rachel's that reciprocity is the heart at legal systems, or else we live under restricted sense of laws in the first place, which means under the ACA it functionally does not matter if we have these systems in the first place. We need reciprocity, and he's also conceding the burden that we should prove that limiting qualified immunity treats police with the same level of culpability that they deserve. This is given no service. He just says that we have to focus on power relationships. However, the NC is inherently a question of power relationships in the legal system, i.e. our police and citizens held to the same level of culpability, and extend arm costs that limiting qualified immunity means suing individuals because solves a problem that result from a collective culture, which is inherently harmful because it means we do not resolve the overarching social structures which controls the direction of any sort of genealogy impact. Because if we are studying the genealogy of the wrong thing, then it doesn't matter, because the harms are coming from the institutions themselves, which is clarified 100% in the arm cost analysis. Is also going cold conceded and turns back his use of genealogy, because it is not going to be a specific situation. If I win that his genealogy is bad, we should maintain qualified immunity. It's a reason to vote neg. Now, go to the counterplan. Dropping the counterplan was devastating, even if its post-fiat still factors into the advocacy. If we establish some vicarious liability, we will actually change the institutional structures that really matter in this world. He's also conceding arguments coming off the app that he needs to find an implementable solution or to rectify any sort of power structure in the first place. And conceding reasons why this is good as well, which means we inherently care about our post-fiat advocacies insofar as he doesn't have one. It's pretty much an automatic negative ballot extend the solvency with good too, that the counterplan creates real change because Highland Rithvik become involved when they're on the line, that would leave control the cognitive hierarchies. It is better to internalize controlling the norm at the top and let it seep down, which is inherently arguing about power relations, which means it links into the role of ballot under the contextualization of Foucault. If we cared about power, then we would want to understand how the police department influences police officers and influence our society as a whole, which is an automatic reason why the counterplan solves better for any harms coming out of the AC. And coming out of the AC. The NC is inherently a discussion that we should look at institutions as a whole, rather than just looking to individual instances, since those do not solve. There's no lip service done in this argument in the 1ARO. Do not give him any responses. Now, off the app. He's also conceding literally every argument off the extended fluidity argument that it takes its own framework of power fluid. We cannot look at identity in the abstract because we do not know what it is. The argument he made off this is non-responsive. It says we should orient ourselves toward it. However, we cannot orient ourselves towards something that we do not understand in the first place, which fundamentally means that his conception of power is impossible to articulate. And he's also conceding the arguments off his care for self that my burden is a prerequisite because I control the internal link. I determine if they are appropriately being held culpable. We cannot care for ourselves if what we are being told is live for something else. Let's go. Flat out conceded all the arguments as to why I control the direction of care for self are going conceded in the round, which means if we care about care for selves, then we inherently look to that NC framework because that controls the direction of any of those impacts. This is cold conceded coming out of the 1AR. Do not grant him any responses on this either. Now, on case turns. First. Extend the Higdon analysis. Historically, limiting qualified immunity has been a tool of the state to cover up. It is inherently a usage of, it's inherently a genealogy studying over time that less than 10% of cases or citizens can actually afford to do civil litigation in the first place. It means his genealogy is functionally flawed because only less than 10% of people can even access it in the first place. And also the state uses it to cover up, which means we need to maintain qualified immunity because civil lawsuits make the situation that worse and do not hold police accountable at all. And extend the Higdon to announce that police exploit financial vulnerability so only some people can sue, which means it's functionally not accessible to the rest of the case. He just says that qualified immunity is arbitrary. Obviously, that doesn't answer back these arguments. These arguments about how the fact that when we looked at the specific instances of qualified immunity, it is net bad because it covers up the broader structural harms that are occurring in the world. If we want to do a genealogical analysis, we should really start at where the problem is. The problem is in institutions, not in individuals. This is going all cold conceded framing coming out of the NC that he has not responded to at all. So the round breaks down very clear. The easiest place to vote is off T. He has no RVI and no offense back to his counter-enter. So it's pretty easy negative ballot because it's inherently the fact that if he says norms are bad and then puts on a counter-enter, that takes away all offense on T, which means you would probably automatically vote off it. The next easiest place to vote is off the NC. The NC controls the direction of any impact coming out of the round. Because we need to attribute self-care to individual people and how we can ascribe those properties to individuals. This is also conceded Wang coming out of the 1AR as well. And the next easiest place to vote is off the counterplan. The counterplan says that we should hold institutions accountable for the problems that they create. The reason that there's corruption, the reason that qualified immunity is being applied arbitrarily is because police institutions let officers off the hook. They let officers act ambiguously and act in ways in which that they could never engage in the first place. The next easiest place to vote is off the affirmative. He's conceding case turns that should prove why his genealogy is bad. If his genealogy is bad, it's submission to negate.
So the order is going to be quickly on theory, overview on theory, then app, top down, then the NCs. Is everyone good?
You really messed up. You did not extend drop debate or any implication of your shell in your previous speech, which means the judge does not have the obligation to vote on it. Also, you've conceded that or may have been norms are not set in stone rather than power, and that upon them with fluid and contingent so theory inherently fails to set norms. Also, this is not a reason to vote me down. My counter-interpretation was an even if scenario. If this view of power is not correct, then I still have offense to a counter-interpretation. That's not a reason to vote me down under my own role about now. Go to the app.
Okay. So a framing issue. Yeah.
The framing issue is that you do not have any offense under the app. The app specifically conditions what a genealogy is. It says that a genealogy has to examine change over time. You can see the weighing arguments from the one era as to why the app is the only one that's examining the history of qualified immunity from 1982 to the present now. Now you've also conceded that your genealogy is always going to be insufficient insofar as it isolates specific moments throughout time, insofar as it does not show the entire history of qualified immunity. You've also conceded that a genealogy has to impact back to care for the self. The problem is that you were in NC and you said that NC impacts the care for the self, but then you were to genealogy specific. You were to genealogy absent from that NC. My argument from the app is saying that if you read a genealogy, that genealogy has to impact back to the care for the self. The care for the self is the conclusion that we draw from the genealogy. They're not two distinct things, which means that the way that you've impacted in the speech does not make sense. Also, go to the top. Yeah. We cannot solve power since because include the app shapes our orientation to power through care for the self, which is a reflective analysis and allowing us to envision a liberated world and how we fit in. That's difficult 1 and 2 evidence, which is only possible through genealogy because it allows us to uncover power relationships and how they shape our present world. That's through Drapes and Rabin evidence. So the role of us to engage in care for self to a genealogy. Now that means that the role about the highest layer functions before the NC. You've conceded the reason as to why the NC. You've conceded the reason as to why the app controls the internal link to the NC because the NC says that every moral rule needs a specific context, but the app says the only context we have is because we need to analyze power relationships which shape society. An investigation of power and how power shapes reality is a prerequisite to the NC. That was conceded from the 1 hour, which means that you cannot use your framing arguments to preclude the apps. Now,
Go to the contention.
Extend that the app is a pre-fiat analysis contending the limitation of qualified immunity would be better orientation of power under care for the self. Qualified immunity has developed in such a way it's harmed minority communities while being skewed towards defendants, all while disregarding where the constitutional rights have been violated. Now that's the Scott, Rolfs, VLR, and Burning evidence. Now the only argument you make in response to this is you say that the app does not analyze institutions, but obviously the app is analyzing how institutions have changed over time. It's just saying the care for the self is what happens on an individual level because obviously it does not make sense for institutions to reflect on themselves. Now extend that the app is better for care for the self because qualified immunity results in arbitrary use of state power that prevents individuals from knowing whether their rights are guaranteed and reaffirms them from disregarding constitutional violations. This also means your counterplan does not link the app is defending it. The app is not defending the post-fiat implementation of the policy. Rather, it's a pre-fiat analysis of the resolution.
So the round breaks down simple. You can't vote on the shell. The highest layer is the roll of the ballot. Your genealogy is insufficient. You conceded reasons from the app as to why genealogy has to examine the entire change throughout time instead of just isolating specific moments throughout time.